Good. Thank you, everyone. Sorry for the technical delay. We wanted to get up and get running on the right Zoom meeting, and I think we are where we need to be. So I'm going to call to order the meeting of January 22nd of the Solar Ordinance Ad Hoc Committee meeting. For a roll call of members, Dave Bowers is here, Mike Copine.
Here, excuse me.
Chris Norberg.
Here.
John Nicholson.
Here.
Tom Kitson.
Present.
Bruce Foster.
Here.
Forrester, pardon me. And we also have Charlie Boonstra and Dee Duffy and Alice Hinkle here supporting the meeting, and a number of interested parties. What I would like to do is run this like a working meeting, including as much as possible, make it a dynamic meeting. That could become a challenge with as many people as we have involved. So please be patient with the process. One thing I would like to note, Mr. Sheeline is joining us as a member of the public and not in an official voting capacity. We need that type of, I believe we need representation from all angles of this to come up with something that works for the participating landowner, for the non-participating landowner, and development. And our goal really is to come up with a ordinance that allows for responsible installation of green energy for Lee County. So that's our goal, and we're open to hearing from all parties. So that being said, I do need to have an approval of the previous meeting minutes. So I thank you, Alice, for putting those together, very detailed. Any additions or corrections to the meeting minutes?
No, Dave, they look good.
Pardon?
They look good. I approve them.
Okay, we'll let those stand as submitted. What I would like to do is just go around for the visitors that we have on both Zoom and here in the courtroom, and give you an opportunity. If you have something you'd like to present at the beginning, we'll take that. What I would like to accomplish in the actual business meeting is the two areas of main interest have been setbacks and the buffer or screening. And what I would like to do, we've talked through in the last two meetings how to do the setbacks, and I've worked with Dee and Alice to put into words what we had agreed to, I think as close as possible to what we had talked about and agreed to in the previous two meetings. We're going to make this a working meeting, as you know, we'll be sharing on Zoom, and it is being shared here on the big monitor, the actual ordinance, and the items in red are the changes, and we'll just go through it. And if we have things we'd like to change, we'll put those in as we go, and we'd like to end up with a final document if that's possible. So we would start with setbacks, and then then move on to the buffering, and then any other areas of interest in the ordinance by the committee. So going around the room, I would just ask for introductions of anybody that's here as a visitor.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Courtney Kennedy. I'm here on behalf of National Grid Renewables, formerly known as Geronimo Energy. With me today from the company is Amber Miller and Keith Bowen.
Chris Hinkle, I'm party at this point. Chris Hinkle, I'm just an interested party at this point, at this moment.
Jennifer Lawson. I'm adjacent to the project. It's the South Texas Solar Project, LLC. And I don't have anything. you said if we had anything to say at this time. I don't have anything right now.
Jamie Lawson, a non-participating landowner that lives within the South Dixon Solar Project.
Adam Luz, resident of Lee County.
On Zoom, Mr. Sheeline? Anything you'd like to share at this point?
Yeah, just a couple of things, and good morning, everybody. And this is, I know we're going to get to the meat of it as far as screening goes. There is, and I mentioned to Mr. Chairman Bowers that and if Charlie wants to comment, there was a concern that was brought up in regards to the AMA that all projects are required to sign. Is that which has great protections for the land and the farmland that is included in all these projects. And this is not only, this extends beyond just solar, but it's also wind projects. And we have the same problem, is that the state of Illinois, even though we have a very strong document in the AMA with very detailed language and that talks about what projects have to do when they decommission and how they behave, through the life of the project. Problem is that if there's a violation, it has been my discovery that the state of Illinois, specifically the Department of Agriculture, that is responsible and is the named party and signer of the AMA, has been proven not to have the ability to enforce the AMA. So there's a thought that the county, if we could figure out a way for the county to have standing in order for the county to act as the enforcer of the AMA agreement. So that's kind of a really big deal in the course of all this, and that's all I have for this morning.
Thank you, Jim.
You bet.
We don't have names with all of the folks on Zoom, so I see a Robert Scott. Please introduce yourself and if you have any comments. Robert? I think. Okay. That's fine. Becky Brenner? That's us. Okay, never mind. And Jenny?
Yeah, hi, this is Jenny Munson Miller with National Grid Renewables. No comments at this time.
Thank you, Jenny. And there are some other, or at least one other okay, thank you. I guess we're good then. So.
Yes, 3 on Zoom.
Okay. So you have in the screen before you, and also for the members, we have the hard copy, the section for setbacks. And this is not, I'm sorry, this is not the version that I have. Hold on.
On the screen.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay. I think we're on the right copy here. So what you see in black is the original wording, and what you see in red are the proposed changes as we discussed last meeting. So let's see. As you can read, a ground-mounted SES shall have a setback for all equipment, including fences, a minimum of, and the beef of this setback for the non-participating landowner is a setback of 600 feet. The desire is for that setback to reduce any visual impact for the non-participating landowner. So as it was in the past, 600 feet from the foundation of any primary dwelling. What has been added to I guess in wind farms, it's been a circular or round setback from the residence, not so much, 600 feet, but they go as a radius. In this case, we struggled a bit with what's the front setback, what's the side setbacks, what's the rear setback, that type of thing. With that said, we define this as a 600 feet from the foundation, and we've further defined it to be a 1,200 foot square centered on the home. And that gives you a square setback from the home of, you have at least 600 feet from the foundation in a square fashion for all panels. And outside of the primary dwelling exclusion, all setbacks will be a minimum of 15 feet. Setbacks to roads will be per the Lee County ordinance, and there's no setback requirements between adjacent participating land parcels. We kept the setback to platted subdivision at 600, and for inverters, as we discussed, was 600. So those are the changes that we discussed and the way of implementing them. What does need to be put in there, the details, setback to what I was looking for is we had the information for the setbacks in our regular zoning ordinance for setbacks to roads, and I'll read those again, and those would be inserted here. A minimum 60 feet from the center line of any township roadway, a minimum of 70 feet from the center line of any county roadway, and a minimum of 55 feet from the right-of-way of any state road in accordance with the county ordinance. So that would be inserted here where it talks about setbacks to roads will be per the Lee County zoning ordinance. So that still needs to be inserted here. Any comments?
So I believe, as I look at it, I think we need to revisit a little bit just because of the added to the board or the change in the group. I thought the 15-foot outside the primary dwelling exclusion will be a minimum of, I thought that was supposed to be 50 feet, but I may be mistaken. So that was where it was, we were greater than 600 feet. My house, greater than 600 feet away was my property line. That's where we're using that terminology.
So the 50 we had talked about, and we got into like cornfield to cornfield. You don't want to use up 100 feet of a prime farm or farm ground for that type of thing. So we to simplify, we made it the primary dwelling is really what we're concerned with. Normal setbacks are 15 feet. And that's what we had discussed was cornfield to cornfield. And I believe this accomplishes that thought without.
So we're talking adjacent. So, okay, I see where you're at.
Yep. So a minimum of 15 feet.
Okay.
Okay.
I also think we need to, the point of contention, what we continue to hear is whether it includes or excludes fences. We know that's what we continue to hear about. We've talked about it, and I would be open to hearing what the new members' thoughts and ideas were on including or excluding fences.
Yeah, I think,
if they want to.
I think the screening and that's the piece that we still need to work through is how to best do the screening so that it's as effective as possible and aesthetically does the job and looks good. And that I think is more a discussion in the screening and buffering section, where the fence is. The other thing that incorporated here, and I think was incorporated in one of the projects previously approved, was normally a electrical installation. Electrical code requires a 6-foot chain link fence with barbed wire, 3 strands of barbed wire. We allow in the ordinance for the homeowner non-participating to request instead an 8-foot woven wire fence at their residence in that 600 or 1,200 foot exclusion zone, let's call it. So that is, and then the location of the fence we will talk very much about in the buffering section. So any further comments on setbacks?
Just a point of clarification, this single sheet that was handed out, what is this? Versus the packet?
It is.
It's a simple form of that.
Of that, okay, because this has nothing about fences on this one. Okay, so it would be excluded from when this is rewritten. Section D on setbacks, you would remove excluding fences. That comment on top, the first line?
I think depending on whether, and I would say at this point, that's an open discussion is where the fences are best positioned. And that may impact whether it stays or comes out, I guess,
Okay,
based on that discussion. Does that
thank
make
you. I
sense?
just wanted clarification on that. Thank you.
Any other comments? Yes, Adam?
I just wanted to speak. I'd rather not be passive about excluding the fence in this section and trying to outline that elsewhere. I believe that around the entire perimeter of an SES, a large SES, there's no reason not to include the fence in that setback. I think that I'm a farmer, I'm a landowner as well. And I happen to farm around a chain link fence with barbed wire on the top of it. And I feel strongly that, you know, the fence should be set back to allow the non-participating resident to potentially still access up to that fence line without risk of hooking or damaging that fence. I mean, when you're driving a tractor and you got a 50, 60 foot implement back there, or you have a planter that's I'm thinking of my big neighbors, you got a 120 foot planter. Nobody wants to hook a chain link fence that's right on the property line when they're out farming. So they'll lose access to their land that could amount to many acres on that side of the fence because of the close setting of that security fence. This is not a fence that's outlined to be a perimeter of a property or to define a property. That's not the intent of this fence. This is a requirement to protect infrastructure. Okay. So there's really no reason that we can't include the fence in that setback. Furthermore, when we get into within 1,000 feet away, my residence might fit that description where there needs to be some visual screening, you know, applied. And the visual screening should be outside the fence as well. I do also then recognize, are we able to fit 2 rows, you know, of shrubbery within that 15 feet without it growing out across the neighbor's property, or is the site owner able to access the perimeter to maintain outside that fence? So that's where, you know, when you start talking about 2 rows of visual screening, you know, on the outside of the fence, maybe that does need to increase so that the site managers have access to all portions of the property from the outside of the fence. When that is not available to them, what happens is around residents' homes, when they cannot access it from like the road ditch line, when they can't access that setback around the homes, what happens is the site managers will insert gates at the residents' properties, okay, to access the outside of the fence. And so when we insert gates into the plans, that's where we have cameras and that's where we have lighting and that's where we have, more issue, right? So around residents' homes, we'd like to have that, not have entrances and add cost to their projects. So again, I'm just, it all kind of ties in, one plays into the other when you look at thousands of acres that we're trying to surround. So I do have, I know that it was handed out here that there's many other counties in Illinois and where their ordinances are, Illinois being mostly underdeveloped in massive solar projects. When we look at comparisons, one might go to areas of the country that are well developed in solar to think about then what their government has been doing, essentially for ordinances. And I do have an example in Stanley County where it's a 250-foot setback around the entire perimeter of the SES in a well-developed, area of the US. So, certainly that could be extreme, right? But that's a guide of what is adopted in counties that still have solar developments coming to them. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. So I guess the question would be, are there any further changes that we want to see on this section? I understand, and we'll come back to whether it includes, excludes fences, because I think that discussion will make itself more clear as we go through buffering.
Dave, having not been in on this before, well, where did the 600 come? Where did it override the 300?
I think, as you see, the 600 feet was in our current, is in black. That is in our current ordinance, the one that we just approved here 2 months ago. We moved to 600 feet from the foundation of a home. We feel that that's the foundation of the home is, I think, a good place to measure from for aesthetics for the people that are living there. That's the intent of that. But that is not changing. We did a little further define that as a 1,200 foot square so that it's not a radius. I think that helps a little bit with making that better. Anything else? Okay. So if we're good with that, I would propose what we're going to do eventually is finalize this in a final form, and then we'll vote to approve it at that point. But this is a working meeting. We're just going to move on to the other area of interest, which is screening.
Can you scroll down?
Yep.
Yep, there it is. Okay, are you gonna read it, Dave, or can we just comment on it?
Pardon?
Are you gonna read that all out, or?
I am not.
Okay, so looking at it real quick, this is kind of what we talked about last time. I believe that we're all kind of in agreement. We might as well put it in now rather than wait and then come back. But I think we're all in agreement that woven wire fence is probably the way we want to go, which will come in at 8 foot tall. I would like to see on that bottom line there where it says at least 7 feet tall within 3 years. I'd like to change that to with at least 8 foot tall within 4 years. Knowing that we're probably gonna, no reason to move forward when we know we're just gonna come back to that, I believe. So.
Okay. So the suggestion is 8 foot within 4 years.
No bar.
And then
I
once we
think-
get to the actual fencing part,
Yeah, I think that's actually in the fencing
that'd
section.
be
I
in the
didn't.
fencing section.
Okay.
Yep.
So page 5 for me.
And that has been done on the one project. And I think having it in the ordinance and having that as essentially a right to the non-participating landowner is where we want to be. Okay.
This, for the people who, a 30,000 foot view of this is 30 foot wide buffer screening, 1,000 feet from the existing dwelling is a 30,000 foot view. And is that on the outside of the fence?
That,
Is that where you want to define whether or not you want it on the outside or the inside?
let me try to take a stab at this. Because we've talked about, and there's no clear, you know, there's not a clear best way to do things necessarily. One thing I would say is just from practical or from effectiveness, the further you get it away from the residents, the less effective it is at screening. So if you take it and put it 1,000 feet from the house, it's not as effective as it would be near the property line.
I don't disagree with you, but I don't believe that's what the non-participating landowner believes. I think, I'm talking to enough people that.
Yeah, let me go through it.
Yep.
Okay, so that being said, from one school of thought, I talked to Dee this weekend, probably many of the situations that she must deal with, the county must deal with, is on land boundary disputes. It's just common that they occur. And the way to avoid that is to have the fencing placed near the boundary line. If someone maintains a piece of property that's not theirs over 20 years, they have rights to claim the property, and that can be problematic. You're shaking your head at them. Go ahead.
I'm sorry for the body language.
No,
I
that's
didn't
all
want
right.
to interrupt because I feel like it's
Well,
certainly a talking track, and that's like, it's certainly, I didn't want to interrupt. Go ahead.
Okay, no problem. I'm sorry. And I'm going to talk through the different scenarios because I'm not convinced that there's a perfect answer. Okay. So to avoid disputes over boundaries, it is better to have the fence. Maybe a better way to put it is better to have the fence, on, or it actually needs, I think per normal fencing practices, it needs to be slightly behind the boundary of the property. That would avoid boundary disputes. The most effective for screening would be to have the buffer, the landscape near that fence. Now, from a developer situation, it would be desirable to have that screening on the developer's land so that it's easy to maintain, that it's clearly theirs. It'll be removed when the property's decommissioned, all of that. That would be a clean cut, the cleanest situation. From a non-participating homeowner, you would then have the option of a one wire fence, so it doesn't look like a prison, but you would be looking at a fence and then the buffer zone immediately following that. And let's call it 30 feet. One other option is to say, okay, we'll set the fence back 30 feet. And that the vegetation or the buffer zone would be on the non-participating side, and that then would still have to be maintained by the developer. It makes it more difficult to maintain. The standards of maintenance may not be. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I just have a quick comment to make, just an idea to throw out from a
Please
developer's
do.
point of view. We would prefer that the fence be on the property line, but we agree that, for some of the non-participating landowners who want the vegetative buffer, from our perspective, it would be easier to put the buffer on their property and let them, if they want to keep it after the project has reached its full life, the buffer can stay. If they want it ripped out, it can be ripped out. My idea, what I'm thinking about is, could we give the non-participating landowner an option of the 600-foot setback to include the fence or a vegetative buffer to be placed on their land? Let the landowner choose. It gives a chance for the developer and the landowner, the non-participating landowner, to work together to best address what that non-participating landowner wants.
And I think that's a valid point. It's more work for them. because they're going to have to be the ones that have to reach out to non-participating landowners. My concern is, what if that non-participating landowner doesn't want to negotiate with them because they're just torqued off? I think that needs to be set in stone that this is what it is. It is 600 feet away, including the fence, but we're willing to negotiate with you, of saying if it's around my house, you know what, I don't want it 600 feet away, to your point that the farther away I get, the less buffering I have. I want it 30 feet away from my fence line with the fence right behind it, and then have prairie flowers, wildflowers, whatever you may want. But I think that allows the non-participating landowner to have some input and say of what happens around their property. So I think to Courtney's point, like, yeah.
If we keep it, to me, if we have the setback, what are we, and we include the fence, let's say, what are we screening from then? Because we've mitigated this chain link with the 3 strands of barbed wire. We've changed that down to a woven wire fence, which is an ag fence. So at this point, what exactly are we screening?
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
when I built my house in 2006, I didn't build my house to look at woven wire fence or any fence. I didn't go and build in the country to look at a fence.
Sure, but with all due respect, you built in an ag 1 district, and still the use of a solar energy system is a permitted use in that ag
It
1
wasn't when I
district.
built my house in 2006.
Sure.
So I built my house to look at trees. So as a non-participating landowner, I would prefer to have those trees on my side of the fence.
I think we can get there, I think. What I would say, and I don't know if you're in an ag district or not, but I think pull the farm out of it. Your neighbor wants a fence.
Dave, make sure you're talking to your mic.
That, may I interject? So, I mean, that is a point. I mean, before this is installed, if I wanted to have just a agricultural, 4 strands of barbed wire type of a fence to hold my cattle in, I mean, I certainly could put it on the property line, and I may do that. So then you have conflicting whose fence gets installed, around the perimeter of this, my fence or theirs, again, by giving enough of a setback to the fence to allow for them to get access to it. Because again, this is not a fence that's outlining a boundary of a property. This is a fence for security of infrastructure. So this seems to be a no-brainer to integrate solar. What we're actually visually screening is a 20-foot tall structure that's obtrusive compared to the normal aesthetic of Lee County. I mean, it really is. This is unique. This is special. And so we're trying to integrate this into the fabric of our community, and we're trying to figure out the best way to do that before there's massive community pushback to this whole industry, which could happen 3 years from now when it's quantified, when we visually see it. So I think it's really important.
Can I also add, how close are the panels actually to a fence if it was actually a part of the project?
Typically, they're about anywhere between 20 and 30 feet from the fence. We have to have an exterior row around the fence line between the fence and the panels for maintenance, for fire, for all sorts of purposes. So typically anywhere between 20 and 30 feet.
So typically, so you would actually.
So in between there's typically there's like prairie grass, flowers, some type of plantings. Yeah.
So in regards to fire protection and actually effectivity of the solar with a 7-foot or higher tree line, wouldn't you prefer it to be on the outside of the fence for shadows and fire protection? So it's not, if they would start on fire, they're on the outside of the fence protecting the solar array?
We typically negotiate with adjacent property owners to put the trees on their property as opposed to our property, because when we remove a facility, we tear everything out.
So like we're all in agreement that it goes on the outside of the fence.
But on the mean, you wouldn't be,
But the fence still needs
Don't
to
know
be
of
part of
any-
the project.
I don't
But the
know.
fence is typically on the property line.
Okay, look,
Could I speak? I just,
sure, go ahead.
I just want to throw something out there. To me, it's just thinking, it seems, I did a little bit of research, yesterday on the whole, Courtney's issue with the, adverse property or whatever the legal term is. And what I have found that you can actually do I don't know what the actual legal term is, Courtney, maybe you can tell me, but it's basically a property line agreement type deal with, saying this is where, this isn't the property line, this is where it is. Also, if it's in an ordinance, it's going to say this fence is 600 feet from the property line. Therefore, if it's ever challenged, the time would be now to dictate the property lines, and then the fence is 600 feet from that property line. And then with that, it seems to me like we're creating more issues for ourselves by having more of these, what's the term? More of these, what we're doing right now, more of these setbacks. We need like a standard one, because it's going to be confusing 30 years from now. And no, this one had 200 feet, this one had 300, this one had 600, this one was 50, this one was 15. There's no standard. I kind of resort back earlier in this conversation we had, maybe we should have a certain setback for under 500 acres and some for over 500 acres. I commend the meeting last night where they actually came up thinking outside the box, come up with 3 different tiers for enterprise zones. Where it was this amount, and then it was this amount and this amount. Maybe we need to think like that, because to me, it's creating a heck of a headache with having all these alternate or all these different. We need to come up with one standard and apply it to all wind farms, or have a cutoff of this one is under 500 acres, so it's going to fall under this. I personally, as a landowner, if it's a 100-acre solar farm, I'm not opposed to being closer to it than I am a 4,000-acre solar farm. As size, to me, the size would dictate the setbacks that you would want from your property line as a non-participating landowner. And what we also have to realize is, I keep hearing, well, your neighbor could build a fence on the property. My neighbor's not building a fence. It's a Fortune 500 company building a fence. That's a part of the project. It's not a fence, it's a part of the project. We have to consider it as part of the project. It's not my neighbor building a fence. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I could respond real quick to the possibility of having a property line agreement. In Illinois, there's 5 elements that you have to prove for a claim for adverse possession. The possession has to be continuous, hostile or adverse, actual, open, notorious, and exclusive. So if you had a property line agreement, you're just going to help prove that 4th element of open, notorious. If you delineate, this is still our property, but it doesn't prevent anything from the non-participating neighbor or any neighbor to come in and use that. You've just helped them prove that 4th element, that you've defined where that property line is, and that neighbor is still going across and using it. So I don't think that would necessarily work in that scenario.
This is not an easy question, and we can appreciate all of what has been said, I guess is the way to put it. Let's scroll down to the section.
I just have one thing, sorry. So this, no, yes. This that you handed out, this is just a summary of new versus old and all the sort. So you on vegetation buffers, are we not there yet? Are we there yet? We're on the buffers, correct?
We're on buffers, and
Okay.
what's up here is correct. I'm not familiar with what you have in your hand. I apologize.
Okay, well, it says under vegetative buffers, Lee County provisions mirror Ogle County, and Ogle County specifically states 7 feet at all times. So it doesn't mirror. Because it's not
Correct.
it's not 7 feet at all times, it's 7 feet within 3 years or 8 feet within a year.
The original revised ordinance did mirror the Ogle County provisions. This is what they've changed to the original revised.
Okay,
And this, just to let everybody know, I had brought a spreadsheet. It was a 1-page. This is what it looked like the first meeting. This much longer one is just different issues that we've compiled along the way. And like I announced during that first meeting, this isn't by no means exhaustive. This was just us looking at what other counties have done in their ordinance, and we tried to put it into a spreadsheet just to see for illustration purposes how other counties are handling solar energy systems.
And so for anybody who's like, Courtney just made this up, I actually did fact check a couple of these counties. Like, it's not like she just pulled stuff out of the air. Like, they are accurate. So I give you
That's
that.
refreshing, thank you.
Do they reference these, Courtney, as utility grade versus just a residential grade?
So what was interesting is that there were a few counties that actually went so far as to define what a utility scale solar farm is versus like a community solar. But some counties did, some counties didn't.
In community solar, I would, think the setback would be less, so
Right.
you're talking 4,000 acres here, so you have to modify the setback.
Part of the,
And you've already discussed all this anyway, I'm just updating.
part of the, say, education process for myself, because I'm not a zoning board person, and my background is utilities. I worked up at Byron for years, and project management. Just the where the fence goes. There's a lot of pros and cons to consider. I appreciate what Courtney did. She did compile a lot of information for us. One of the things that helped me with this whole process is understanding it's not an either or. Use of farm ground, whatever the quality of the farm ground, we want to be as effective as possible and yet make it as aesthetically pleasing to those that live nearby. And having large setbacks, 250 feet, would, if you did that around the entire project, would use up hundreds of acres on a project that are not useful any longer then. And so that you're trying to balance that need to be effectively using the property and yet being respectful of the non-participating homeowner that's nearby. And that's the balance we're trying to strike, is to get there. So I would like to read this section. You probably don't have it there, but this is assuming that we decide to put the fence at or near the property line to avoid, let's say, disputes, let's just say. The option to the homeowner, and it says, this section, it says the homeowner at their discretion, thank you, at their discretion may elect to receive a one-time payment. This could be, an annual payment too. This is what I threw up here for now, though, is a one-time payment from the applicant equal to the cost of the design, installation, maintenance in perpetuity, and removal of the visual screen in lieu of an actual visual screen. This option shall be detailed in writing by the applicant as part of the buffer notice, including a breakdown of the one-time payment components. This one-time payment allows the non-participating landowner to install their own visual screen in front of the required boundary fence, if so desired. So it would allow a one-time payment, and I would say there's benefit for the developer not to have to deal with this. And this allows a homeowner a one-time payment, and the cost of putting this stuff in and taking it out is not inconsequential, and maintaining it. If you're willing to do that as the homeowner, and then you put up what you like, don't put up anything, whatever you want to do. But if you then put up a visual screen that is to your liking, it adds value to your property, and you're paid a one-time, or we could make it an annual payment that's compensatory, that's similar or equal to what they would have to spend to do it and maintain it themselves. That, by putting it in here, and this is what's happening, I think, in some negotiations with non-participating landowners. By putting it in the ordinance, it gives you, the non-participating landowner, the right for it. Because I would tell you, with the projects thus far, we've had, I think, reasonable companies to work with, and have tried very hard to strike that balance of having everybody walk away as happy as possible. We want to make sure that if we have developments in the future, that the homeowner has the right and that the developer has to negotiate in good faith, I guess, to a good end. We don't want to leave that to chance. So that this paragraph is an effort towards that. That allows the screening to be on the homeowners, and you put in what you want, and the compensation would be equal to what it would cost them to do it.
You had mentioned, I've heard you mention several times throughout this that, you used to work up at Byron. So you would be familiar, and this question might be more for Courtney, but you're familiar with Byron. They own massive amounts of land. They have the owner controlled and the owner occupied area. Only the owner controlled area is under a fence, correct? And then I guess it would be the same as a Dixon prison. They're only the actual prison area is surrounded by a fence. The whole property is not. So what is the difference between that with adverse effects as opposed to this? What would be the difference of the Byron Nuclear Station owning 500 acres but only has the building fenced in? Why weren't they worried about adverse property then? Or Dixon Prison, or get my directions, lots, or the Lee County Sheriffs? They have fences, but they're not going around their property. So why weren't they worried about it then? Or why wasn't it brought up then? It's no different than what we're talking about now.
I would say there is quite a difference between a nuclear facility and a solar farm.
We're talking about the fence, or not the problem. We're just talking about the fence. Why was it not?
Sure. I think I might be able to answer that. The only distinction that I'm aware of is that the National Electric Code requires the fence around the perimeter of the SES. So that would be why the fence is around all of it and not just as you were talking.
My question would be, the reason we're saying we don't want the fence on the property, or that we do, is because of someone claiming it's, why wasn't Byron worried about that when they only put it around the building, but they own 1,000 acres, whatever they own? What's the difference? We're not talking about the property or what it's going around. We're talking about the fence. And all I've heard is that it's adverse, whatever the legal term is.
Yeah.
But yet I see everywhere, like I said, Byron Nuclear, the prison, all these guys are putting chain link fence up or fences, but they're not on the property lines. So it's able to be done. It's just that we're trying to make excuses for not doing it. It's part of the project.
But because the solar is actually going right up to everybody's property, just about, correct?
I don't understand. Sorry.
So this solar is different because it actually utilizes all that property, where the prison and Byron do not utilize all that property. They only have buildings.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. Can I draw us back in here? I think
That's why. Oh, sorry, yeah. I'll hear about it at home later.
I do have,
Dave,
Like I said,
to bring back to this though, I mean, when I study ordinances as well, I mean, I've got one pulled up here, and with respect to a major, they do in this ordinance declare a major versus a minor SES. Okay, so I think acknowledging that we should handle them differently is respectable, right? With respect to a major SES, all structures and fencing associated with a major shall meet the minimum front, rear, side property line setbacks. So, and these were, I mean, again, I really respect the approach that they did to this ordinance. As I look at it, I mean, they have objectives at the beginning that they outline. And one of them is to still promote the economic development of the placing of an SES facility in locations that do not impair, conventional manufacturers, industries, and so, again, I look to other counties, and this has been something through every process that we've gone through with the SESs that have come to this county. I've said and highlighted that there was essentially a fence problem in the ordinance. So this was this is really a hot button topic, I feel like, and I think it's very important that we're not passive about it. So.
Go ahead, Chris.
A couple corrections that I see in here. We changed from non-participating to homeowners' rights. I just think that everywhere where it says homeowners, we need to change it to non-participating.
Yep.
So just for clarification there.
Sure,
So,
good comment. Thank you.
I'm going to
May I make a
make
comment?
these guys mad. Sorry. Just in regards to this, if I'm a homeowner and I am, you know, what stops me from putting up a 20-foot high screen on this section that's gonna block the solar?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Yeah. So. Well, what if I plant trees that grow up to 15 feet?
That's, and that goes back to the point of what we're talking about. If you want a 20-foot oak tree, I don't know. I'm guessing oak trees are pretty expensive. I'm not a smart man, but but I'm saying that if they're going to come and say, hey, we're going to give you all this money. I've said all along that money talks, right? And the solar companies and every company, it's the cost of doing business that, hey, we'll pay you to put in whatever type of trees you want, and they get to be yours forever. And you now have your own screen. So Bruce, you had something?
Yeah, this, at the homeowner's discretion, one of the things that happened in the wind farm area was shadow flicker became an issue, and it always has been an issue. And one of the ways it was mitigated was go to the homeowner and say, here's $1,000 a year for 20 years, and you put up what you want to take care of your shadow flicker. If you want to put up trees, you can put up trees. If you want blackout shades, you can get blackout shades. If you want to put awnings on your house, whatever it is. But this gives a discretionary type thing. And whether you do it on a yearly basis or whether you do it on a one-time basis, I don't think it makes any difference. But I think this is an approach that needs to be taken and let the homeowner make his own decision on what he really.
Courtney?
So I just have one correction that I see on this. I believe it's subparagraph 4. I believe it reads, at the time of the building permit application, the applicant shall provide proof of installation of the buffer. I think that should be at the conclusion of construction, because you wouldn't put the buffer in before you would get the building application.
Okay. Thank you. John, you were gonna say something.
Well, I was just agree with Bruce, give him discretion. If
Talking
I'm
to
a
your mic.
homeowner,
Talking to your mic.
if I'm a homeowner, I would prefer to see the trees before the fence. And
I would too.
like that, yeah, give them money to plant what they want, whether I would plant some sort of evergreens that would be there to buffer year round. But the homeowner then makes a call and they can't backlash. That's the way I would feel.
To me, I think this is a key part of, making it aesthetically pleasing for the homeowner, actually being able to add value to your property rather than,
And that cuts the
being
maintenance
temporary
cost
in nature.
for the wind, or for the solar farm.
yeah.
So they're all about it there
So-
on somebody else's property. And somebody else will maintain them rather than have to plant them, mow around them, tear them out at the end of the project, which does really no good at all. I mean,
Yeah, it doesn't add any value to
Doesn't
the
have-
property.
all it is extra costs for
Yep.
them.
Adam?
If the fence is set back 600 feet from the foundation of the residence in the ordinance, and then visual screening is within 1,000 feet of the residence, it's managed properly. I would be looking at a visual screening and not looking at a fence. So if that's adhered to, I mean, if when I'm in an agricultural, I have 2 acres, I have 1 acre, there's a barn, there's structures there. It's not my primary residence, but there's no ability, perhaps to put the visual screening on my side of the fence.
But what we're trying to do, Adam, is give the owners the non-participating owners, the ability to do that. And so you may not have it. So I'll just throw it out there. And this is where I think we're getting pretty darn close. We've actually accomplished more in this meeting than we did in the last 2. But I think we're pretty darn close there. I think right now we're talking 600 feet from a primary dwelling. We then have 2 rows of trees with a fence behind that, 600 feet away from the primary residence. with the discretion that any of it can be changed with the non-participating landowner's written approval. And they can be paid for that. They can be compensated for that. They can be paid in trees. They can be paid in just flat out money, because I don't want trees. I want to take the 10 grand or whatever the number is going to be from the solar company and put it as a mortgage payment, down payment on my mortgage. Like, that's now for you to get. But I think we're finally getting close to
Sure.
where we're at. I think what you've done here, Dave, and everybody who was involved in this really gives
Some options.
it gives the options to the non-participating landowner to get what they ultimately want. So congratulations on that.
What do you guys have percentage wise that would be landowners that actually waive in all your past projects? Landowners that would actually waive the setbacks? I mean, if you could put a percentage number on it, what would you say it would be? Whether it's money or just, I don't care if it's on my property type deal.
Well, non-participating
Yeah,
landowners?
non-participating.
Okay. We typically work out an agreement with non-participating property owners that, for landscaping, the majority of people will end up just taking the money.
So I guess if we were to say in the ordinance, 600 feet from the house, unless the property owner negotiates something else, and it sounds like more times than not, you negotiate something else, why would the 600 feet be an issue if you're negotiating stuff or you're paying them anyway? If I, as a landowner, say, build it, put the fence right on my property, give me the money, or, you know, if you're doing that more than not, the 600 feet shouldn't be an issue.
I don't think it is right now. I think that we're finally getting to the path that
Okay.
we're all kind of saying, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm speaking for other people. I'll know I'm speaking for Copine because I know where he sits. But I think we're getting to the point where we say include the fence. We've got the buffer systems in place. And then you give some, with this paragraph right here, when we talk about screening, you ultimately give a lot more say to non-participating landowners than it had in the past. Would you
In the
guys
ordinance.
agree? In the ordinance itself.
And you take some of the burden off the wind farm.
Right.
To plant, maintain, tear out, and time is money. And you don't want to break it down to money, but I think it gives the landowner a lot more discretion as to what they can get too. It takes the burden of financing.
And then it goes off of the guy who doesn't want to communicate with them. This is what it is. It's trees, it's screening 1,000 feet from the house, fence 600 feet, solar panels, and away you go.
I think from the developer standpoint, they would say if the fence stayed on the property line, do the buffer, do this, but if the setback includes the fence, the 600 feet, which is more than a football field, then from a developer standpoint, I don't think we would want to do the vegetative buffer idea. So I think if we could keep the fence on the property line, keep this buffer.
But if you had a preference, you would not want the buffer, the vegetative buffer on your property by the fence. You would probably
Yeah.
much more be willing to make a one-time payment.
Correct, if it
To
could
the
go on the
homeowner.
other.
Right.
Hey, here you go. You can buy 150 or 200 evergreens or whatever you prefer, but you got to maintain it. And that way you're looking at the green side of the trees rather than looking at it through a fence.
Or even if there was some way, I'm sorry, I don't mean to talk over you. If there was some either or, like if we could have the fence, have the landowner say, okay, we want the fence included in that 600-foot setback, then no buffer, or the opposite, the fence stays on that property line, but you get the buffer, the money for the buffer, whatever it may be.
But then otherwise the fence could be up by the solar array.
I'm going to fight for both. I want both naturally.
No, I
as,
know you
as
understand
I'm,
that.
but,
Of course.
so you guys are saying, you know where we're at. I know. But once again, more often than not, we're going to negotiate something that's going to be an in between, right? So I think and this is the problem that we've talked about, and I don't know if you guys, that they've actually been really, really good to work with. It's the next company that we're worried about, right? And they may be the next company. We don't know, but it's putting in barriers in place. So I believe that it should have 2 rows of trees that have to be 8 foot tall within 4 years, followed by the fence 600 feet away from my dwelling, solar panels after that. I don't know if I need that in a motion, but That's where I think I'm
Yeah, at this point, I think that it's best we do like what we have been doing, and we'll incorporate the comments from our meeting today as best we can with the parties, and then we'll take a final vote on the completed package.
I just touched the microphone, everybody looks, I'm sorry. And being new to this, I just have to ask the question, is there anything in here, I didn't see it, that trees have to be maintained? I mean, arborvitaes are one of the main trees, and
Yes.
sometimes winter's hard on them, so they have to be replaced within a reasonable period of time.
Yes, there is. Yep.
if I remember correctly, they have 12 months to recover, something like that. They have to maintain at least 7 feet fully bushed for 12 months, otherwise they have to be replaced. So that is
I mean,
built
from
into it.
experience, some trees, when you want them to be 8 feet tall in 4 years, you aren't necessarily always buying the best quality tree to last for 20 years.
You can plant poplars and they'll be gone in.
Courtney has
If
it.
I could make one real quick, if we're getting to a point where we're going to include the fence in that 600-foot setback and then keep the option of the vegetative buffer, could we, just a suggestion from a developer standpoint, could we narrow down that 1,000 feet language to make it less burdensome on the applicant? And I get that that's not your prerogative to protect the applicant, but that just, to me, that's just,
The 1,000
it's a lot.
1,000 feet in regards to the inverter, or are you talking 600 feet in regards to the dwelling? Can you scroll up to setback? You want to go back to setback section, correct, Courtney?
No, I don't think, well, let me,
No.
hang on.
Oh, you're saying from the residence, so it fans out.
So
like we had
that
talked.
visual screen, let me see, that is located within 1,000 feet of an existing dwelling or residential district. Could we narrow that down for the screening requirement?
No, I believe we should just do the entire perimeter of the SES with visual screening. That's where we should be. We've already come down, Ms. Kennedy, to 1,000 feet from the homes. And it just, I get distaste for this level. This is, I need to collect my thoughts, actually.
I
Sorry.
think the 1,000's fair. I disagree with Adam, and Adam and I are probably closer than a lot, but I think on this topic, I respectfully disagree with them that the whole project needs to be buffered. That's a financial burden that if as soon as we do that, you'll never build here in Lee County. Maybe that's a good thing, depending on who you're talking to, but right now for me, I think it's a yin and a yang. And I really think if we narrow down the 1,000 feet, like you said, it's going this way, more or less. So you're going
Yes.
400 feet extra type of in how, maybe I'm thinking of it wrong, but I don't think it's the great cost. And especially how many houses are we dealing with? We're trying to find spots where we deal with as few non-participating landowners as possible anyways, so.
That is an important piece of it, I guess, as I get my head clear. With these setbacks, I feel that this is reasonable. And, as the developers look for land in the county, they would tend to look for less populated areas of the county, which would actually be wise then as to where we're looking to place SESs. If these setbacks have a larger impact on a project in particular, it's because then it's in a highly populated area, and that makes it harder to make this all work for the community and then for the developer. So,
Well, it's just added cost for the developer, so naturally they're going to look at less populated areas. It's not always a necessity, and that's what we're trying to do is protect everybody along the way.
Can I ask a question, please?
No.
Yes, you may.
So on the 1,000 feet, I guess I want to be clear what we're talking about and what. So you have a house that is located on the frontage is an 80 that runs horizontally. So you have a dwelling in the center of that 80. So the 80 is 2,640 feet, half mile. is 1,000 feet from going on both sides of the property. So we're actually talking about 2,000 feet. I guess I need I need to understand what 1,000 feet means.
Can you state that again, Jim?
You understand what he's talking about?
I do.
Okay, hold on, Jim. We're just gonna draw it. Gotta love the whiteboard.
Oh, okay. Here is the property. Here is the house. What we're talking about is 10,000 feet this way. This way. This way. So really what you're looking at, anywhere within 1,000 feet. So you're really talking about 3,000 feet if it's surrounding on this side.
Correct, but we're already 600 feet away because of the fence.
Right,
Yes.
Right.
This expands beyond that, right? So
right.
This is
And
only,
that's what Courtney was saying, could you tighten it up a little bit? Because what you're looking at for something like this is about between $40,000 and $45,000 we had our engineer run.
Yep.
So, that's not unanticipated. For landscaping, this is just for one house.
Right.
Kind of
Yeah.
figure you're looking, kind of, what footage are you looking at?
You're looking, that's for 3,000 feet.
that's 40 acres for 1 year of your project. I mean, are we talking exorbitant cost to your project? I mean, that's
Well,
what you're,
It
I mean,
is when you're talking about trees that have
This
to be, that's just for the material. That's not for the installation. That's not for the
I mean,
maintenance.
what's the overall percentage of your,
But now this goes,
Right, not for the removal when they get to be, when they're sitting out in the field,
Right.
and they get to be 40, 50 feet tall.
but now it goes back to the fact that that money can be spent moving the fence towards the homeowner
Well, and that's-
so
But, right,
this is only a visual screening barrier that we're talking about. Visual screening for 1,000 foot away from, so I mean, again, when you look along the road, I mean, if I look 1,000 feet to the left of my road frontage and I look 1,000 feet to the right from my dwelling, we're just talking about putting a visual screening there to lessen the impact of the SES. So, I mean, now if I turn to the side of my property and I look left and I look right, if it's on that side of me, we're just looking to have 1,000 foot of screening, there, if there happens to be 1,000 foot stretch. But we already know that around my home, you're allowed to put the fence in the visual screening. We've lessened the perimeter because it's only 600 feet from the foundation of my house around the perimeter, right?
right.
So
But what you said was 600 foot square. So when you look at that, that's actually 860 feet from the corner. So that's not 600. That's much closer to that. So. Right.
I guess. There we go.
Jim knows what it is.
Jim,
You wanna
Jim's
see the board,
asleep.
Jim?
Morning all, hello.
Yeah, it's time to wake up, Jim.
So,
Yeah, I just can't get my head wrapped around if the screening is tight to the property and then you have this screening going 1,000 feet either direction, I don't see what that accomplishes. Except you're adding cost to somebody. And I don't say that in defense of the industry. I'm just trying to understand what the hell we're asking these projects to do and what we're trying to accomplish. That it just doesn't make sense to me. You're not going to, Your house sitting on a block and you've got trees going down 1,000 feet down your road isn't blocking your view of the solar farm. It's the screening up against your property that's going to block is going to screen that view, not trees 1,000 foot down the road.
If you drive by my house, it does block the screening of the SES, 1,000 feet in both directions.
Adam and I'd have to run down your road. I know at my place, my sister's place, all you're doing is planting trees, making yourself feel good. It's not really accomplishing anything.
Let me, I guess, say this, and my assumption was that we are keeping the fencing near the property line. And that what we were discussing was whether the buffer goes on the developer's property or on the landowner's property. If you start moving the fence to the 600 and 1,000 feet, I don't know that that is all that effective with screening. And I don't know that it's a reasonable thing for the participating landowner to give up use of that property.
Can we take a vote on that? Because like we're at a point where we have to decide whether we're including the fence or excluding the fence. And the 6 of us have to decide. Because now, once I know where I'm at. It really comes down to where you two feel comfortable. Does the 600 feet include or exclude the fence? And once I identify that, then it's there, right? Because right now I'm saying the fence is out here, and I'm just like, okay, so now I'm 1,000 feet. There's no reason to start putting trees, right? If I get that, so. But is your project going to go around the house, or are you going to square off? I don't know, but let's identify where.
Bernie, you had earlier presented an either or. Is that you want to talk through that again?
Again, I'm sorry.
Earlier, you'd, I think, presented a either this or that scenario that seemed to be good.
Sure. So to me, just looking at it, it seems like there's a fence and a screening issue. So if you come across an adjacent landowner, non-participating, and they say they have the choice, they can either elect to receive the buffer, or they can elect to have the fence included in that 600-foot setback. So if they say, nope, I want the whole thing set back 600 feet from my residence, then the fence is 600 feet away. That's the way we go. If they say, no, we want to elect to receive the vegetative buffer or the payment or whatever that may be, then the fence stays on the property line. They get the vegetative buffer or the monetary equivalent of the same to put on their property line to screen the fence. That's what I was suggesting.
Thank you. I think that really does, as far as I provide some options to that are palatable, I think, palatable to both parties, because it's not an easy issue, but that I think is a good suggestion.
Courtney, how's the scenario go when you're talking about putting the fence and the vegetative buffer on the property line around is that on the property of the company building the solar array?
As far as the buffer going, is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Under that scenario, we would prefer it to be on the non-participating landowner side.
You would prefer it, but you
But we
can't
would
force
work,
it.
yeah, there has been instances
Correct.
where we've worked with landowners, yes.
If I say
Yes.
I don't want it, the heck with you.
Correct.
You know, I'm not gonna participate in that.
And just so everybody's clear, from our position, our ask from a developer standpoint is that the fence stays on the property line. But I'm just trying to think of scenarios where there's give and take with an adjacent non-participating landowner.
So in the scenario where the fence goes to the property line and you're gonna buffer and say, I'm a non-participating landowner.
Yep.
And you're gonna do the trees, it's the same cost as whether or not it's 600 feet away and the trees are still on the outside. Theoretically, like we're talking negligible. And I can see where your point of being 1,000 feet is I'm starting to understand
I
that.
would not vote
Yeah,
But it should match the 600 feet.
right. So, but the issue that if the buffer is going to be on our property, we would want it close to the adjacent neighbor's property. We would set the fence back enough to get the buffer in, because then we would control the property within the fence to maintain with our crew, as opposed to having to go outside the fence to maintain all the grass and the plantings and all that kind of stuff. For the rest of it, the trees is one thing we can handle that piece, but all the perennial plantings and stuff need to be maintained, need to be checked for weed control, all that stuff, and that should be located within the fence.
And I understand that, but I continue to go back to non-participating landowners. It's a happy medium in between. Like I said, give them the ability. So
If we were to go that route of the either or, just a suggestion, there's going to be some non-participating landowners who don't want to talk to the developer before we go obtain. So there needs to be some default set, and of course, from National Grid's position, even after a project is built, from my experience, the company is still willing to work with the landowner, but there at least needs to be a simple rule that we can apply in the instance where that non-participating is just not communicating, or communications have broken down.
At the end of, say, a 20-year period, or whenever this stops.
Yep.
If it stops, you still have the trees on your property. So what do you do with that?
Under that scenario, if the trees were on the project side, those would all get ripped out at the conclusion
Right.
of the.
That seems like a terrible waste of time and money to me.
Sure, when it reverts back to a field, you're gonna have to rip that out. Correct.
Right.
yeah, so the participating landowner can be like, no, I like those trees there. I want to deer hunt it. There's scenarios, but the problem is, John, what you're trying to use right now is logic, and we can't use logic. We have to use the fact that 35 years from now, or whatever it may be, we can't, how do I want to put it? Yes, we can come up with scenarios like it doesn't make sense to plant a tree and then uproot it in 35 years. But unfortunately, that's the reality of what we may have to do if non-participating landowners don't want it on their property.
Right, and I think from a developer's standpoint, it's an either or from our point of view. It's either the fence is set back the 600 and or we give the vegetative buffer. So that's what our position would be on this.
There's no strip plant that the buffer in the property.
Say that again, I couldn't hear you quite all the way.
Use your mic, John.
Yeah, he made the comment that there's no place to plant the fence or plant the vegetative buffer on his side of the property line. So he has no alternative. And that's what I'm trying to get at is you, like you say, you have to have this. It's an either or thing. And I'm trying to minimize the site of the array, which is offensive to some people, or to, well, I lost my train of thought, but I want to, you try to make it happy for both of them. You don't want to incur the cost for the developer. You have what's unnecessary cost. And but you still want to buffer the site of it.
For me, it's just cost of doing business. I think with the information that you have under the screening, that you leave it up to the non-participating landowner, and the way it's written there, I think you can have both. I'm sorry, I know you don't want both, but it's the reality that it probably, I believe it should have both. And then it's a negotiation and a dance with non-participating landowners, and the ones who don't want to end up with it at this scenario. And that's what we
My
have to figure.
suggestion, I think we're nearing our 11 o'clock hour, and I would like to conclude at that point. I think we've gotten a lot of good input, and I think I'd like to take an attempt at doing the same type of thing as coming back with a final draft, let's say, of this buffering discussion. And I think what I hear in general, the either or scenario, and then providing the option for the non-participating to locate the vegetation buffer on their side, or the other side, that type of thing, is where we'll draft this and come back together and try to finalize it. One thing I would like to discuss, I think Dee had provided the community meeting edition. We could just go, be able to talk through it though, right? And can we put it up on the screen?
What is that?
There, and Dee, I don't know if this came out of another county or where, okay. This was just something we felt, Dee felt, it's a community meeting. I think you have it there in front of you, and we'll share it on the screen for those that don't have it. It's a community meeting that I think one of the problems we've had up till now is, you know, the first time a non-participating landowner finds out about this is, you know, pretty quickly to hearings and that type of thing. And we want to try to avoid that. We appreciate it, you know, to give people a little time to digest, get up to speed, and have some feedback to be able to provide some feedback. So this was a section that we thought we would potentially add to the ordinance that's not currently in our current ordinance. And Dee, I don't know if you want to.
But if we can get something more substantial, meetings out there, typically speak, invitation when the hearings start. I thought this should be.
Yeah, I applaud looking into this. I appreciate that. In our circumstance. Yeah.
So
David, I couldn't hear D at all. I couldn't hear.
Oh, okay.
it's to classify for participating, non-participating. It's moving up a time frame of letting non-participating landowners know about the said project. And I don't think that's unrealistic. You, Courtney?
No, in fact, I agree. I agree with this in its entirety. As local counsel for a company, my first string of advice is just go out and talk to these people. So I think if you remember too, I think in our ordinance, if a township has its own comprehensive plan, you're required to go to that township anyways prior to the ZBA hearing. So I think if you just make it a blanket, you have to go into any township. I think it's the more information, the better.
Amen.
Yes, Tom.
I appreciate this a lot, and being new today, I'm much quieter than normal of asking questions, I guess, but I appreciate you folks coming in because I talked to some of you on the phone and about these issues, and that's why we initially asked for a moratorium, was to be able to do this and have people involved. So I think this is gonna take care of all our issues, I hope, and be able to make it work very well. Thank you.
Yep. So with that, I guess I'm about ready to wrap here. What I would say is I appreciate all involved here in the demeanor of the meeting. I was a little fearful of what it might be. But we're trying to make it a working meeting, and I think we accomplished that, and I appreciate the demeanor here, and we will continue the same type of thing going forward. I would hope that we could, with incorporating the comments from today, come back next time and hopefully be completed or have a finished document or thing that we could adjust and approve. No, we need to schedule a date. So
Could I interject just one quick,
Yes.
with what's on the screen here, Mr. Bowers, is that in, I didn't see that in this. I would like to review it, the wording that's specifically up there. So, okay.
thank you, Adam.
I have one request.
Mhm.
I love the scenery that Jim had in the background of his picture, but you suppose you could go to Europe or someplace real, fancy and give us a new background? Your travels are fantastic. I enjoy going with you. There you go.
There you go.
There you go, Gene.
Love it.
Oh, can't forget the dog.
Lucky dog.
Before we adjourn, I'd like to revisit what Courtney was talking about, 1,000 foot. Did we come to a conclusion on on that? or
I think we came, I mean, the defining the 600 feet as a square automatically increases that to more like 850 or so. That use it, my intention in the final draft would be to use that as that boundary,
600.
600 square, not a 600 radius. 1200 square, actually. That's answer the question.
Something to think about.
That's fine. Thank you.
Is that more to your liking, 600 versus 1,000?
Yes.
That's the fence from.
No, we're talking the vegetative screening.
Essentially, the landscaping being the same, or the buffering being the same as the requirement for the.
And then the fence would be on the property side of that buffer.
That's where
what
the
we have
either
to
or.
decide.
You can have the fence
Fence will
at
be-
600 feet, you can have the fence at 600 feet, or you can have a buffer.
That's where that's my point. We've this, I'm starting to get really frustrated. We're at meeting number 3. That right now, the meeting number 4, that is what we have to decide. Is the fence 600 feet away or is it on the fence property line?
I think with that option, you don't have to make it,
No,
it has to be this way.
No, because it goes back to the non-participating landowner who doesn't want to negotiate with them. We have to have a hard stop in there. And
Well,
that's-
I would say that if you're not willing to negotiate, the hard stop would be, as we normally would, fences would go on the property line and the buffer would be behind it. Chris? Pardon?
Just carry on.
Yeah. I apologize. I think any reasonable non-participating, as you are, is going to be willing to talk to a developer. And
The problem becomes, it seems like just a easy, the problem is it seems like just an easy conversation, but at the end of the day, it ends up being what else is included in those conversations. It puts non-participating landowners potentially in giving up rights or in peril to accomplish possibly a negotiation. And it's unfortunate because there could be future issues that are unforeseen by us, but
sure,
that non-participating resident ends up in a potentially, right, ends up in a legally binding contract where they aren't able to defend themselves or what have you. Like there's give and take in those negotiations that ends up not probably benefiting the non-participating resident. So we have to be cautious.
Yeah.
Chris's frustration. I mean, what actually is stopping you from presenting that and voting on that today? Well, the site can, I guess. I just lost. Having the fence on the non-participating owner side with the buffer for the, like I said before, I don't want to see a fence. I'd rather look at trees than a fence.
But I think the option that we've discussed, and I think is a reasonable one, is it provides, and the non-participating person gets to make that choice. Now, does there need to be a default? Yes. If you're unwilling to talk, then there would be a default. But
your section 2, is it J2? Gives that landowner that discretion already, or that non-participating owner when the verbiage is changed, corrected from homeowner, it gives them that option to say, yeah, put it on my property line.
What I would say this was assuming was that we would say the fence is on or near the property line always. And I think it sounds like there may be some non-participating that would prefer more of a setback to that fence. And developer would be willing to do that, but not both.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying is you have non-participating owners here that have already voiced what we think is an agreement of 600 foot, the fence goes on the property line.
Say that again?
Of 600, the fence does not go on the property line, the fence goes 600 foot
Okay.
away with the trees on the property's non-participating owner property side. You have non-participating owners, I believe, agree with that right now at this point in time. I think they agree with that because they don't want the 1,000, correct? The developers do not want and then in the future, non-participating owners, giving them that out of the option does that. That's what I'm saying is
I mean,
I guess
the comp-
it doesn't make sense what's stopping it right now.
compensation would be for, I mean, if we're assuming fences are on or near the property line, the compensation would be for if you decide to put the buffer on your side of the fence. If you were to want the fence 600 feet back and have essentially use of the property that is, not non-owned, that is an advantage to the non-participating. And I think possibly an undue burden on the developer to do both.
That's fine. And I guess in the big picture, if you're looking at 10 acres, I just take my place, for example. I'm on 2.5 acres. I don't know who else, out in the country. We don't all have 600 acres or 400 acres that you put a chain link fence around. That's going to be way out. So now I got a 2-acre parcel that's got a 6-foot or 8-foot fence around. Now I got a box that I feel like I'm in a cell 24 hours a day for the rest of my life, temporary or not, it's the rest of my life. Let's be honest, it's a life sentence for everyone in here. Now you're saying, well, I can have an option of putting trees on my property. If I got 2 acres and I put trees around my property inside the fence, now I got a half an acre. I can barely get out my door. I don't have a yard. I have trees and a fence. That's a hell of a way to live the rest of your life.
But with the option that we're discussing, you could also have it 600 feet back.
With no.
Right.
And the woven wire fence requirement. So you said the chain link under the new
Well,
ordinance.
chain link or woven wire,
Right.
it's 8-foot fence. You're in a cell. I mean, it's a 2-acre cell for the rest of your life. It's a life, temporary or not.
What's the difference if I moved right next door to you and I decided to put a fence on my property?
Well, you're not going to allow me to put an 8-foot fence up, right?
Well, I'm gonna do it on my property.
But you won't let yourself put one up, right? What's the limit of the fence? 6 foot. So that's why you won't put an 8-foot fence up.
What if I'm behind you and I want to put up trees on my property?
Well, that's.
So you're trying to.
But you're doing that. It's not a Fortune 500 company doing it. You're doing it as a landowner. It's not part of a project of a 4,000 acre project that has to have it. It's part of the project. They can't build the project without it. So therefore it's part of the project. So it's not the landowner putting the fence up. It's a Fortune 500 company, as Jim pointed out, putting it up. It's not you. That's a difference. And it's not ag. I mean, let's be realistic. It's not a row of corn. I don't know how you can even compare it. Just because solar friendly people have dictated that solar and wind is harvesting the sun, how can you compare a roll of glass and metal poles driven in the ground the same as crop? How can you do it? I don't understand. I mean, and by definition, I guess, but let's be realistic. It's not. It's not temporary. It's a life sentence for everyone involved. It's encroaching on the property lines of everyone. We have to keep that property, and we have to keep some distance from it.
And we're providing that option.
The fence is part of the project. Therefore, if the project is 600 foot offset, the fence has to be offset. And then if we need screening, the screening should be outside of that fence to block the fence. I mean, if the landowner.
We're trying to get to a win-win situation.
But they're not doing it. It's a company that's coming in from California or wherever they're from, that's going to take our land, sell it to Chicago or whoever. We're going to live with it the rest of our lives, and we're not going to see any benefit.
Dave,
Very minimal for the
Hold on.
schools. Yep. But we're not going to see any benefit as actual participants or residents of this county.
Well, yeah, we haven't even discussed that, but I appreciate what you're saying. We're trying to negotiate to a win-win, and there will be some give and take. If everybody goes away, if both parties should go away feeling like they gained something and that they lost something, and that's where you need to get to.
I just don't want to feel like I lost my American dream of a little place in the country.
I appreciate
So
that.
Pick a fence, not a 6-foot fence with barbed wire.
Yep.
Or an 8-foot woven wire fence.
Jim.
well, I think we need to keep in mind that we're not creating this ordinance for one particular project. We're creating an ordinance that covers a gamut of situations that's a difficult job. And as always, I commend the committee for having a robust discussion. But we're trying to, the point is, yes, you may say that it's different between a large company and me doing it as an individual landowner, but we're creating an ordinance that covers everybody. Maybe I decide to do an 80-acre solar farm by myself. I'm going to be subject to this ordinance. So the idea that this is a 500 Fortune company is really irrelevant to the discussion because the ordinance covers everybody.
Jim, you're the one that brought the Fortune 500 company up though, so that's why I just threw it back out there because it can't be irrelevant now, but was relevant when you were giving your speech. And
okay, let's the demeanor is not where we need it.
So to Dee's point though, how many driving around the county, how many residents put up a 6-foot chain link fence with barbed wire or an 8-foot woven wire fence around their property?
Could I offer?
I would have, Jamie, for Christmas trees, but it got to the point I couldn't afford to do it, so.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, it must not be too desirable if no one's doing it. So, I mean, to say, yeah, I could do it, but no one's doing it, and I would guess the reason why is it's not too desirable.
Could I
Adam, go ahead.
interject a little bit? So sometimes let's take a step back and think about, what are the reasons that we're here to think about the ordinance? And this county outlined a little bit of a directive in their ordinance, actually. And I'm just going to read. One of the points is to protect residential areas and land uses from impacts of an SES facility, to minimize visual impacts of an SES facility through careful design, placement, and landscape screening. Point D is to accommodate the growth and need for an SES facility to provide alternate sources of power in the county and in the region. And then point E is to promote economic development by placing SES facilities in locations that do not impair conventional manufacturers and industries in locations where municipal type services are located or planned. I feel like those are a few good points to think about as to why we're here today, right? I mean, what some common core objectives would be. And so unfortunately, I feel like this really went well as a whole. And I hope we can get back on the track and continue, through these discussions. I will say that it does outline in here that, they sat with engineers and lawyers to kind of work through this ordinance as well. And I feel like it was well written, and there's some other topics in here that we may need to get into, even as far as battery banks and things that have been proposed that we haven't thought about in our previous ordinance because maybe those things didn't exist. So I do recognize this is going to be a longer process maybe than what we anticipated. Going through, there's a lot of discussions and there's a lot of pieces and parts, and I could see that on our original ordinance. A lot of input to be offered and a lot of details to be worked through. So thank you.
I'd like to thank you, Adam. I would like to set a next meeting date if everybody could take a look at their calendars and see if this is open. So we're on Friday the 22nd. Would Wednesday, the 3rd of February at 9 a.m. work for everybody?
Yes, for me.
What time?
9. That work? Right.
Yes.
Okay. So the next meeting, and again, the intent will be we'll have a markup and go through that in the meeting, February 3rd at 9 a.m. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Dave, I'm sorry, if I could, I'd like to see, it's a little cost involved, but it's difficult to sit back here and read what's up there, more so for the people that are toward the back of the room. I would like to see that everybody get a copy of what we're talking about so they can make their notes and everything if possible. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I move we adjourn.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Recess.
Recess, okay. Recess. Do I have a second?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone, for your participation.
Mike, you didn't get a copy of what we were discussing, it was on the screen. Big D